to the digital side. People are taking their shops into the digital space. It makes us more vulnerable to cyber attacks. So first of all, I would like to hear from you, Brensil, as a cybersecurity manager at PwC, and from where you sit. How does the environment look when it comes to data protection?
Okay, so from a general perspective, I think I'll start off from a regulatory perspective.
Yes.
I think we are at a place where we have laws and regulations, and we are constantly updating them. There are new determinations that we are seeing from the authority that touches on data protection. Mm-hmm. We have laws that touch on cybercrime. From the previous incidents that we've seen around cyber attacks, I think we then now appreciate the extent to which it can cripple us. It can deny us access to critical services. Mm-hmm. Like you've rightfully said, we now are accessing learning online. Our transactions are online, so we can literally get crippled through this attack. So from a general perspective, we are making progress in terms of regulations, but we are still so much exposed. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of our data is online, a lot of our services, we are very much dependent on the internet right now. Mm-hmm. So we are a bit more exposed than we were a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that. And now, Lawrence, let me bring you in and ask, she's spoken about the regulations that we have. And when you look at the regulations, for example, data protection and cybersecurity, let us just put them together. When it comes to the regulations, who regulates this data? Who is mandated to do this?
Okay, from a security point of view, if we are providing security, then we would be, as a security provider, ensure that we adhere to the regulations, the cybersecurity regulations. And there's an interrelationship between cybersecurity and physical security. Okay. I just want to touch on a World Security Report which was recently launched by G4S. It's available on worldsecurity.report.com. It surveyed chief security officers across 30 countries and asked them about their concerns about threats, external threats, internal threats, and how these can be mitigated. And in the area of cybersecurity, it talked about this interrelationship between cyber and physical security, and each being dependent on the other. So when it comes to regulations, we as a security service provider would have to ensure that we adhere to these regulations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for example, as a country, do the laws that we have that regulate things like maybe cybersecurity, are we really following them? Because in July we experienced a lot of hacking, and I think that was the month this year when almost every service was hacked into. We had M-Pesa, we had University of Nairobi, we had also KPLC. We had it's really paralyzed even the railway service and printing the tickets. So are we really following the laws that we have?
Okay, so I think when you look at cybersecurity, of course, there are the companies that are trying to follow what is really necessary to ensure that you're securing either your data, your financial information. But at the end of the day, where there is opportunity for crime, there's always a market, there's always a group of people that would want to take advantage. So, because for like Kenya, we are heavily invested in technology. It means even the attackers would be heavily invested in the technologies that we are deploying to ensure that they also get a piece of this technology cake. So yes, I would say we are doing enough in terms of following the regulation. Could it improve? Yes, definitely it can improve, because some of the attacks that we are seeing could be prevented. So in that particular scenario, then we can do better. But I think Kenya being a digital, when you look at even our the number of people who have access online, Kenya is leading in terms of Africa when you look at Africa. So we are definitely a lot more exposed. Whereas for us, things to do with internet banking, is something that we need to think about. Other countries have not gotten to the point where they're even doing banking through the internet, through their mobile phones. So we have a lot of vectors where we can get compromised.
Yes.
A lot of, especially companies within the financial sector, are doing a lot in terms of having the right technologies deployed to prevent such attacks. Some of these attacks are opportunistic. Some of them are aimed to just disrupt. So there's no money they're going to get out of it. It's just to disrupt. So a lot of them are opportunistic. So a lot of investment, I feel, has been put, especially from financial services sector, to ensure that the impact is reduced at the end of the day. So that's why even when you say we had the incident, there were some organizations that were affected, but they quickly were able to recover just because of the investment that they have put in place. But on the other hand, I think the smaller businesses are really struggling because then they have not put in the right investment, so they end up either being completely devastated with such an attack, such that they are no longer operational.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Lawrence, the space to improve. Especially, she's mentioned about we need to improve, we can improve. But now, when you look at even a government service being vulnerable to attack, what does that speak to a normal Kenyan who uses these services, and they don't, of course, have they don't have the platform to bring in other institutions to help them in security. So from where you sit, when you look at such a scenario, where are we going in terms of trying to improve this? Because we need to improve on certain parts, and we've seen the gaps that we have.
Okay, thank you. So I want to again talk about the cyber security aspect and then the relationship with physical security.
Yes.
So on the cyber side, we've got attacks which are going and attacking systems or banks, and those can be done remotely. And that requires robust systems and processes to prevent these attacks and constant updating of these to be able to prevent the attacks which will invariably come daily for some institutions. But then on the physical side, we know that there's a relationship between the physical and the cyber, right? So in order to access systems, people may need to access the building to get into the systems.
Yes.
So they need to have robust physical security relying on technology. And this technology can involve AI, it can involve facial recognition, biometrics, and this then provides a higher level of security against these threats and hazards. But then it comes back to the point that you were raising, that there are also laws and regulations about how, for example, we as service providers would need to protect the public from, and ensure that we are there to data protection regulations.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now, Lawrence, still on you. For example, we usually have the security personnel who usually man many businesses within the city and different towns. Now, when it comes to security and how they are supposed to operate, and especially when it comes to attacks, because we've seen in the previous years when we usually have attacks that maybe an establishment has been attacked, you find that the security person or personnel who are there, they were also involved, and they were just like any other citizen. Is there training that is needed to this personnel, and do they need to be maybe given some other gadgets that will keep the establishment safe, because they usually have the rungu and the security stuff that checks what would you say?
Okay, thanks. I'll refer to one of the findings of the World Security Report, which is that chief security officers believe that one of the most important characteristics of a security officer is integrity. So when we at G4S, as part of our onboarding, we look at the background, we look at the history of the people we are onboarding to ensure that they don't have any criminal records, and that we are confident that there's nothing in their background or in their past for us to question their integrity. We also take them through our own internal training program. But coming to the specific point that you raised on when there are incidents, there are things that can be done to enhance the level of security that you have in buildings. So, for example, we can have security officers that have body cams on them. And we know that when we have body cams, there's a higher level of responsiveness, both from the officer as well as from the public. There are other pieces of technology that can be employed, for example, Android phones, which also are linked to GPS tracking to show where the security officers have been. So these are ways to enhance the caliber and quality of the security officer that is providing the service that can mitigate the threat that you mentioned.
Right, Lawrence, thank you so much for that. And now, Brensil, let's move and look at businesses. When it comes to data protection, do businesses self-regulate to ensure there's data protection, or is there a mechanism to rectify data breaches, especially when a data breach has happened? What are the steps that are followed in order for them to know, okay, this is where something was wrong?
Okay, I think a lot of organizations at this point are not aware of even the extent to which the processes that they need to take to ensure that they are complying with the law or they are handling data the right way. And I'll give you an example. Even how we collect information. Someone mentioned how we write our names in buildings, how when you go and whatever service that you go and purchase a good, they will start sending you marketing emails, you receive funny phone calls. So a lot of organizations, I think, are still living in the past where you can do whatever you want as long as you have my email, you have my phone number. But when you look at even the provisions of the Data Protection Act, basically, if you have my information, you have to have a legal basis as to why you have that information. It's either I've given you consent or you have a legitimate interest in having that data. But also the concept of data minimization, meaning you're not collecting just any data, you're only collecting what's necessary for you to perform a task. So a lot of organizations are struggling with managing consent. Yes, I've given you my phone number, I've given you my email, but it doesn't mean I cannot say stop sending me this, stop sending me that. So when you look at even the analysis of some of the cases that have been handled by the Data Protection Commissioner, a lot of them are from digital lenders who keep asking you to pay money, or you're a guarantor, you didn't even know you're a guarantor, you're put in a WhatsApp group. So there are a lot of those cases because I think a lot of organizations don't understand the extent to which they need to go to protect someone's data. So a lot needs to be done in terms of understanding why you have this data, understanding that the people, the data subjects themselves have rights. I have rights to say, I need to know what you're doing with my data. I need to know, I can stop you from collecting or even processing my data. So a lot of organizations are still struggling to come up with the right processes of how to effectively operationalize those controls.
All right, thank you so much for that. And now, Lawrence, when it comes to, Brensil has really mentioned something that we usually see almost in every establishment. You have to write your name, you have to write your ID number, your email, and your phone number. So do you think there's a way that this information cannot, is not supposed to be written maybe on maybe the notebook or somewhere? Do you think there's a way that we can introduce something different to make sure that at least if someone is accessing a building or an establishment, they just have a way of identifying the person?
Absolutely, there is. And this is something that falls squarely in the work that we do as security service providers, because in many of the buildings where we provide services, we do need to management access of visitors. So I do think that writing these things down in a book is the old way of doing it. And it leaves people vulnerable to the possibility that that information will get into the wrong hands. And just as Brensil has said, then people the information gets misused. So I think there are a number of things that people can do. So organizations like ourselves is firstly to understand what the laws are and the way in which we can protect people. And because we're a multinational, we can get some learnings from some of our sister companies that operate outside of Kenya and have maybe had these things in place for longer. But even then, we need to understand the laws in Kenya. So we need to get the guidance from the likes of Brensil of what laws, the latest laws in Kenya are and what we need to do. But as a solution to what you've just mentioned, rather than having these things written down, we can put them in tablets. We can know the names of people who are coming into buildings in advance. You can have photos as well, which will move the problem away from being written down in a book. But we still have the responsibility to ensure that that information is not misused. But it is easier to do it when it's in a digital form, to have processes and procedures to ensure that that data is protected. And that's where I believe the industry will go, and that's certainly where we as a company, G4S, are going.
Now, you mentioned of course, outside Kenya. Let us just look at cross-border. And Brensil, I want to come to you and ask, in your line of work, have you experienced issues with respect to maybe cross-border data protection? And what are some of the issues that you usually encounter, especially when it comes to if we are doing business maybe with a different country and there are some certain regulations that really don't make the transactions easier?
Yeah, so I think there are quite a number of countries that are very specific about certain types of data leaving their countries. So you'll find there are countries that would require you as a bank to actually have a physical data center or servers in their country. You can be operating from wherever else, but you need to have that information sitting within your country. Even in Kenya, we actually have in the Data Protection Act where it says there are certain services, critical services, that you must have a copy or that information sitting here. So it's not being pushed to a different country. Of course, things such as elections, our data when it comes to census, such things, that's critical information. So there are a lot of cross-border issues that you have to think about, especially if you're dealing with international companies. Number one, you're not supposed to share information or to transfer data to countries that do not have the same level of controls as Kenya or higher. Meaning if a country does not have data protection laws and you're there sending our personal data, it means in one way or another you're in violation of the act. When you look at the international companies that are, the European nations, for example, for them it's even more strict, because then if you don't meet their standards through different regulations or through different mechanisms as a business, then you're not supposed to even handle European data. That's why at some point, a lot of companies were then complying with the GDPR. So I think there are quite a number of requirements for sharing data. So number one is what type of data can you send out and what can't you send out, where you need to have a copy here. Number two, even if it's not sensitive information, there are restrictions as to which countries you can share this information with. And before you even do that transfer, you need to get approval from the Data Protection Commissioner. So you'd probably do an impact assessment, send it to them so that they approve.
All right, thank you so much for that. And now we've come to the end. Lawrence, your parting shot in terms of security and what needs to happen now that we are moving to the tech side of everything. And just give us your last sentiments, and then we'll come to Brensil, and then we finish.
Yeah, I would like to invite viewers to look at our World Security Report on worldsecurity.report.com, where we talk about the importance of security moving towards the integration between people and technology, and using AI, using facial recognition, biometrics as part of physical security. And when thinking about cybersecurity, just remembering about the interrelationship between cyber and physical, and that a vulnerability in one side can create an issue in the other. So they need to be looked as an integrated issue.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll borrow what he has said as my first point. There's a lot of connection between cyber security and physical security. And for viewers who probably are struggling to understand the cyber side, if you look at how you beef up your physical security, or if you don't beef up, then there are consequences. It's the same thing with cyber. And we've seen a lot of instances where physical security has actually reduced the impact of what a cyber attack would have been. So I think my parting shot would be, the same way you protect your physical environment is the same way you need to protect your digital assets, your cyber security space, as a company, as an individual. So a lot needs to be done. I think we've only scraped the surface as Kenya, both from cyber, privacy. There's a lot that needs to be done.
All right. right. Yeah. Thank you so much, lady and gentlemen, for joining us today and discussing about this very important topic. All right, we've come to the end of business today. I believe we've picked up something. Check out that World Security Report by G4S and just learn how to use AI for facial recognition and where the country is moving in terms of physical and also cyber security. All right, that's the end of this edition of Business Today. My